So welcome, our brilliant colleague, Ekua. I so appreciate your consistent leadership. And as always at SETC, we begin all things by giving thanks to the Almighty. We give thanks to our ancestors. We give thanks to all our ancestors who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, Akua, please share a little bit about your work and introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you today, Victor. It's really a pleasure to be here. My name is Ekua Quansah. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the founder and principal consultant at Quansah Consulting, which is a data-informed, research-informed, equity, diversity, and inclusion consulting firm. I'm a lawyer by training with an academic background in equity studies, and I've spent over 15 years working across sectors, law, research, retail, nonprofits, in roles focused on equity, diversity, and inclusion, or I'll refer to it as EDI, or more commonly known as DEI. My consulting practice really grew out of the realization that a lot of organizations want to do better, but they don't always know where to start or how to move from statements, I'd say, to action. So at Quansah Consulting, we work with organizations that are ready to reflect deeply on how systems are working or not working for the people within them. We do everything from equity audits and employment systems reviews to co-developing EDI strategies and offering long-term advisory support. I'd say a lot of our work is it's behind the scenes. So it's helping people really rethink how hiring happens, how programs are developed, how staff and community are engaged. We don't tend to drop in with generic frameworks or with all the answers, really. We meet with organizations where they are and work with them to move forward in ways that make sense for their context. I really enjoy partnering with other consultants on their projects. That's something that I really value, that spirit of collaboration, of shared learning, of bringing different perspectives, because equity work can't be done in isolation, and neither can the work of trying to change systems. So that's a bit about me and about what I do.
Incredible. Thank you so much. I appreciate all that context. So my next question is, what's inspiring you right now in your work, or what's keeping you up at night?
Yes. Well, I'll try to focus on what's inspiring me because it's a beautiful summer day here. So I'm most inspired when I see concrete shifts in how systems function. So, when a policy changes to reduce bias, when, let's say, accessibility is factored into budgeting instead of being treated as an afterthought, or when a leadership team reworks how decisions are made to include more voices. That's the kind of change that keeps me in this work. It's easy to focus on individual moments, and those do matter. But what really energizes me is when organizations start to function differently, right? There are accountability frameworks in place. There are monitoring and evaluation frameworks in place. That tells me that the work is really sticking. Um, I'm also inspired by the people and organizations who've been pushing for change long before I show up to work on a project. Those who have been doing the work, equity work without the title, without the budget, I see them and I value the opportunities that we have to learn from each other. So that's what inspires me in this work.
Incredible, incredible. Thank you so much for, once again, all that context and just all that you're doing for so many. It's truly inspiring. So my next question is, do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work you'd like to share with our community of practice?
Sure. So I'd say a focus right now is helping organizations integrate equity into their strategic planning, including the development of EDI strategies. Whether we're, working on an overarching strategic plan or a dedicated equity strategy, the priority is really the same, which is ensuring a cohesive approach where equity isn't treated as a separate track, but it's embedded in how the organization sets its direction, how it allocates its resources, and how it measures progress. Another focus, I'd say, is on doing more policy and systems reviews, particularly employment systems reviews, where we're looking at how existing practices impact different communities within an organization. So we're looking at whether systems are equitable in how they function day to day, whether they're creating conditions for inclusion and conditions for accountability. Um, but more broadly, I'd say we're encouraging organizations to hold steady in this work, and that's a priority, even as the climate becomes more complex. That doesn't necessarily mean doing things the way they've always been done. It means staying grounded in the core commitments and values that led them to this work in the first place. And then I'd say finally, our final priority is, we're keeping a close eye on the research space also. Um, it's important to understand what the shifting climate right now means for advancing equity in research environments and how we respond to that with thoughtfulness and clarity, because that's an area of interest for me and an area of interest for the work.
Incredible. So, what are some of the challenges and barriers you face in your work, and what are some of the approaches you and your colleagues are taking to overcome some of these challenges and barriers?
Yes. Oh, challenges. Yes. We're working as I'm sure you know, in a very difficult social and political climate right now. And there are growing narratives questioning whether equity work is still needed, whether it's inherently divisive. And that creates a real hesitation within organizations, especially those that are wary of drawing attention or controversy, right? And it's not always said explicitly, but it shows up in how priorities are set, in how budgets are allocated, and how public commitments are framed. And so we're also seeing a disturbing trend of equity roles being eliminated in organizations, positions that were created just a few years ago, often after these long-standing community calls for change, and they're being cut quietly or not so quietly in some cases. And that signals something, I'd say, larger about institutional will and how precarious this work can be, even when it's positioned as core to an organization's values. Um, in terms of how we're responding, we're staying attentive to those shifts. We're naming them, we're not ignoring them, and we're being very clear with clients and with collaborators about why the work remains essential. We're encouraging organizations, as I mentioned, to stay the course. This isn't the moment to step back. In fact, it's the moment to root deeper.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you. Thank you. So, my next question is, what is your ultimate goal, and what does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
My ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to support organizations in building the internal clarity, the infrastructure, the accountability. I know I use that word a lot, but the accountability is key here, to sustain equity work over time, regardless of the external pressures or shifts. And that means creating the conditions where equity isn't reactive, it's not dependent on a single role, but it's something that's reflected across the organization, across policies, relationships, everyday decisions. Um, it's not, I'd say success doesn't always look like a dramatic shift within organizations, doesn't look like necessarily a public statement on something. Sometimes it looks like the small and steady changes in people's experiences, right? So, a board conversation that starts from a different set of assumptions, or a policy that is reworded, reworked to really consider the barriers within that policy or the implementation of that policy. We're always asking what is shifting for the people who have faced marginalization, who have faced oppression, for the people who have been harmed. And whether we're working with executive teams, with community partners, or with board members, everyone has a role to play in that shift, right? So success for us is when those roles are understood, when they're supported, and when they're aligned with a shared sense of responsibility.
Ashe, ashe. So, my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our community of practice?
I do. I do. I would say at this stage, you know, a number of organizations have laid the groundwork, they've developed the plans, they've launched initiatives, they've made commitments around equity. Um, the work ahead is about deepening, as I mentioned before, right? It's about ensuring that equity is reflected in how decisions are made, how people are supported, how systems are created, and how people are held accountable over time. So my call to action is this: don't retreat, right? I think we're being pushed to retreat. Don't retreat. Revisit your foundations with intention. Ask what's still resonant, what needs to evolve, and where you may have drifted from your values. But this is really a moment to stay grounded in the commitments that you've made and to continue the work, right? We need to continue this work. It is so important. It is so essential. We need to keep going. And it's hard sometimes, but we have each other. This is a community of practice, as you mentioned, right? We have each other, and this work, as I said, cannot be done in isolation. So it's an opportunity to strengthen those bonds and to really root ourselves in this work.
Ashe, we will not retreat, we will not surrender when it comes to justice, access,
Yeah.
inclusion, diversity, decolonization, or equity. I couldn't agree
Yes.
more. And once again, I just thank you for all that you do for so many, your remarkable leadership, your candor, and just your sheer inspiration. So once again, just thank you, Akua, for your time and your leadership. And as always, at SETC, we close these conversations the way we began by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, Akua. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Victor.